When it comes to the decision about what to buy, we face endless trade-offs. There are many other things we can use our money to buy, and we are limited by what money we have. Thus far, we have built a theory of consumer behavior to try and explain and predict how we go about choosing what to buy and consume. At the core of this theory is an assumption that people are trying to optimize their own well-being within the constraints they face. We have expressed this problem mathematically with utility functions and budget constraints and worked through the solution. But we don't want to think about just one consumer. We want to think about how society itself can optimize the use of the limited resources we have. To better understand how society at large organizes its economic activity, we used our consumer theory to generate market demand. Market demand aggregates each consumer's optimal choice of consumption across all possible prices they might face when buying that good or service. The key fact about market demand is that it is downward sloping, meaning that as the price of a good decreases, the quantity demanded increases. This simple but powerful observation is called the law of demand. But we don't want to lose sight of the consequences prices have on human welfare. People like it when the stuff they need and want is affordable to them. Higher prices mean our optimal consumption decision lies on a lower indifference curve, which corresponds to lower utility or lower well-being. When prices are high, the goals we are able to achieve are more constrained. But when prices are lower, we're able to consume more, raising our level of utility. These changes are reflected on the demand curve as our position moves along the combinations of higher prices and lower quantities or to lower prices and higher quantities. But we can also observe the changes to our well-being on the demand curve. Consumer surplus is the value created through exchange which accrues to the consumer. There are a lot of simple joys in life, like buying a new pair of pants or getting a better keyboard or painting a wall a new color. Think about something you bought recently that brought you a lot of joy. That is consumer surplus. Whatever it was you bought brought you more happiness than it cost you. Our consumer theory is able to measure this happiness for all consumers of a product as the area above the price but below the demand curve. This is the difference between what people are willing to pay, represented by demand, and what they actually have to pay, which is the market price. Consumer surplus represents the added utility we get from lower prices. Lower prices mean we're able to afford more, not just of this product, but of everything we buy, because we have money left over for it that we were willing to spend on this product, but don't have to. Consumer surplus is a measure of how much consumers are winning in the exchange of goods and services. It's the value we claim, but don't have to pay for. Think about the consumer surplus you get from various products. As I'm recording this, gasoline has been pretty expensive lately, eating into my consumer surplus quite a bit. In fact, one way to really think about the concept of consumer surplus are situations where you lose out on a lower price. Imagine filling up your gas tank and then driving a mile down the road only to find a gas station which is significantly cheaper. That would be pretty upsetting, right? That disappointment is the result of missing out on a higher consumer surplus or a bigger difference between what you were willing to pay and what you actually have to pay. I don't own any diamonds because I wouldn't get very much consumer surplus from them, but these probably pale in comparison to the consumer surplus we all get from things like water or the internet. Just go a day without water and you won't believe how much you'd be willing to pay for a glass of it. Or think back to a time when the power went out and you didn't have internet for a time. It's agony. Heck, think about what you get from the internet and now try to estimate how much you would be willing to pay for electricity. The world is a marvel because these things are provided at prices way below our willingness to pay. And the result is a lot of happiness, a lot of consumer surplus. One thing we can do with our model of consumer behavior is actually calculate some hypothetical consumer surplus. Let's say that the market demand function is given by QD equals 100 minus 2P, and the market price is $25. What is the total consumer surplus for this market? It really helps to draw out the graph for demand when calculating consumer surplus. We need to find the area of this blue triangle, and so we need to find the base and height of this triangle by identifying the coordinates of key points on the graph. One of those key coordinates is the market price, which the question tells us is $25. To find the rest, we follow 3 easy steps. Step 1 is to identify this point here. To do this, we plug the price into demand. Demand is QD equals 100 minus 2P. We can plug in 25 for P, the price, and solve for QD, the quantity demanded. It gives us that the quantity demanded is 50 units. We can jot that down on our graph, which now informs us that our point on demand is at the coordinates 50, 25. Step 2 is to find the y-intercept of the demand curve by plugging in 0 for the quantity demanded and solving for the price. With a little algebra, we end up with a price of $50. That corresponds to this point up here on the graph. It is where the demand curve meets the y-axis, so it is at the coordinates 0, 50. But now we have the information we need to find the area of the triangle, which is step 3. You thought you were done with geometry, but alas, here it is again. The area of a triangle is 1/2 base times height. The base of our triangle runs from 0 over to 50, so the base is 50 units long. The height runs from the price of 25 up to the price of 50, giving us a total height of 25. 1/2 times 50 times 25 is 625, which is the area of our triangle and the total amount of consumer surplus. Math is awesome because it gives us another angle with which we can understand a concept. And with a concrete example like this, we can add some clarity. In this example, consumers have to pay $25 for a product. And in total, consumers are buying 50 units of this thing. But a lot of consumers are willing to pay more than $25 for this thing. The person willing to pay the most is willing to pay $50, meaning they alone are getting $25 of consumer surplus when they only have to pay $25 for this product. In total, consumers are spending $1,250 on this product. That's the 50 units times the price of $25 for each of them. But they would be willing to pay $625 more than that if they were forced to. If each consumer paid what they are willing to pay, they would still buy 50 units, but they would fork over $1,875 for it. Instead, by paying only $25 per unit, they are saving $625, which they can use to raise their utility by buying other things. That $625 savings is their consumer surplus.